Welcome back, everybody. I'm Sean LaFlock. I'm here with Scotty Haggins. This is Conversations, Fitness, Wellness, and Longevity. Scott, how goes it?
That's going pretty good here.
That's
Sort of
good,
last
man.
of summer. We got 85-degree day today. It's very
Ooh,
unusual for this time of year, but I'll take it.
ooh. We're still holding strong with 90 degrees right now. It is officially fall.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's hot and it feels like 100 degrees. It's wet. I'm waiting for that those winds to shift. I feel like I am um, Tom Hanks in Castaway, waiting for that one like palm tree to start swaying the other way, so that we start getting the wind from the west a little bit. But overall, I mean, it's the weather isn't terrible. It's just you're used to it at this point. It's just
Yeah.
relentless. We're at the relentless phase, but we still probably got like another month to go. Usually by the end of October, it starts to get nicer. So at the very least, there's not nearly as much sun toward this time of the year, but it is what it is. So we have had an unfortunate turn of events over the last 24 hours. I posted it on my Instagram, a little snippet, but Charles Poliquin passed away. Charles Poliquin was 57 years old. Uh, Charles Poliquin was the founder of the Poliquin Institute I think it was in Rhode
Rhode
Island,
Island.
right?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
He was a enormous influence into the strength and conditioning community. He had coached multiple Olympic athletes, along with professional football players, Canadian football players, track athletes. He wrote for
Quite a few NHL guys.
Yep, NHL as well. Uh, he, he had his biosig course, all sorts of certifications. I know that um, both you and I have encountered him or his work quite a number of times over our careers. But what, when you hear about his passing, Scott, what are your, initial thoughts?
Wow. That's just a um, huge loss for the strength community,
Mm-hmm.
and really, really sad. Somebody that, spent so much time and surely a ton of his own money on trying to optimize his health. And I mean, we don't know at this point what happened to him, but um, at any rate, it's really sad. And I think back, he was actually the first person, as I just began getting into strength training long before I ever thought it would be a career of mine. He was the first person I really started following his writings back in the old Muscle Media 2000 magazine in the
Yep.
mid 90s, and then onward when he went to the beginnings of T Nation
Yep.
online in what, 98, I want to say. And I've followed him ever since the mid 90s, um, for sure. And then, later on in the probably 2008 or 9, started taking a number of his courses. I was fortunate enough to met him in person on a few occasions and been to, I think, 3 different biosignature
Wow.
certifications, 2 level 1s and a level 2, and a PIMS, the muscle activation course also, and then a few of his other courses that weren't taught by him, but I definitely something that, to this day I use a lot of things, or the things that I do are inspired by him, or things he brought to the game, like the tempo prescriptions and things of that nature.
Yeah, that's you're absolutely right. Off the bat there, Scott. It's amazing for someone who spends so much of their efforts on fitness and longevity for him to pass away at 57 years old. Um, Obviously, there's probably going to be more things that come out from here in terms of his cause of death. But the first thing to kind of go about this is just to take a second to mourn and reflect on some of the great things that this guy has done for the strength and conditioning community. I've heard mixed things in terms of him as an individual, but everybody has that, and everybody's had their ups and downs. But in terms of what his body of work is going to be for the foreseeable future, just throwing some books out there that he published, the German Body Comp program, the Polkin Principles, Arms Race, Winning the Arms Race. There's some those are ones that are on the shelves of almost every like strength and
Yeah.
conditioning coach out there, as
Yeah.
some of the absolute base principles of strength and conditioning. I mean, I remember looking through the German body comp stuff multiple times, and then going back to Poliquin principles, and then obviously you've brought into the fray the whole idea of tempo work, and that has been the most profound, um, you know, exercise principle that I think I have used throughout my personal training career, me training as an athlete, and then also training other clients.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, that's certainly, well, tempo, lifting at various tempos obviously existed long before his time. I think the numbering system and really bringing an awareness to it and how you could use and manipulate tempos for different effects was certainly um, something that not many were doing.
Yeah, he
And
brought it basically to the mainstream.
exactly, yeah, yeah. And the whole way that most of us these days tend to write workouts like A1, A2, or B, or
Yes,
these
that's
sorts of
the
things.
German body comp
This
concept.
comes from him.
Supersetting.
This was his, yeah. And those of us that maybe haven't had a lot of direct interaction with Poliquin or certs, but are familiar with OPEX.
Yep.
James Fitzgerald was um, worked under, not with, but I know he certainly studied Charles's methods in the
I want to
early
say he was an
2000s
intern
and
on
late
Poliquin, though.
90s. I think maybe you're right.
Yeah.
So you'll see those the way he writes workouts and tempos prescriptions and things like that are directly based off of what he learned from Poliquin. And then even in the world of the movement world, Ido Portal also was heavily influenced by Poliquin in the early years, and you'll see that in the way he writes workouts and a lot of the things that he was doing, especially back before when he was doing more traditional strength training, you know, gymnastic strength and things of that nature,
Yep.
heavily influenced by Poliquin as well.
Yeah. I told this story a little bit in my Instagram post, but Max Elhag and I have been known each other for, 25 years almost now. And when we were about 18 or 19 years old, so we just had graduated, and I think we were both going into college at this point, or Max was going into a postgraduate year, and I was going into my first year. I don't know where Max found this, but it must have been through one way or another. So we go into the gym, and we do, I think we put like 50% of our max on the bench, and we did 10 reps. And we go back and forth, and then we started failing.
With chin-ups, right?
No, this was bench press.
But it was it A1, A2 with chin-ups for sets of 10?
No, we really didn't know what we were doing, right? But
Okay.
So we did it all like that, right? And we got to like the sixth set, we started failing. So we were like forcing reps for us to finish, and then we would go to the next set. So we did all 100 reps. And then we went to, I think we then did like the incline dumbbell bench press, basically what we kind of saw years later on Poliquin's site and that kind of stuff. But we did hammer strength pull down, same thing, and we would force reps. We did back squat. We did hamstring curls. We destroyed ourselves for this summer. Like, definitely gave ourselves rhabdo 10 times over. I couldn't walk, couldn't do anything. And again, I said it was like some of the best training that I've ever done in my life. And then years later, it's amazing that we saw, I think it was when we first had taken some of the OPT, now OPEX courses. It's like, 10 sets of 10. It's called German volume training. And me and Max looked at each other like, holy shit, this is where it's from. And then we saw that it was even supposed to be with like a tempo. It's like a 4-0-2-0 tempo. So like each set is like 60 seconds of timer detention times 10 sets. Like, I'm like, yo, imagine we even did that. And meanwhile, Max is like a type 1A neurotype, like 1 rep, and that's pretty much all he needs to do in a day. And he was doing this, destroying himself. Meanwhile, I'm much more of an enduring, like, B type. And I was like, this is bad for me. I couldn't imagine how sore he must have felt while doing this. But, fast forward now, I give 10 by 10s to multiple athletes when I want to give them a good stimulus. It's again, there have probably been tons of people in the past who have done 10 sets of 10, but to bring it into the mainstream and to put it in a way that's easily digestible for the general population, I think that's right there in itself is it is creating a profound impact and a change on the strength and conditioning community.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's funny. I laughed when I saw that because I was like, yeah, it was. I think he must have written an article about it in Muscle Media. I found the 10 by 10 German volume training, but then with the second phase of it after X number of weeks would be 10 by 6 heavier.
Yes.
But if I remember correctly, it was done on a rolling 5-day schedule. So it wasn't even like Monday, Wednesday, Friday. It would be Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday off, Thursday, and then Friday off, and then you would start all over again on Saturday,
it wasn't
Sunday.
Even a 7-day-a-week thing. It was like literally
it's a rolling 5-day cycle, and it was bench press and pull-ups 10 by 10 at a tempo. And I think you're right, 402, 90 seconds rest. It's funny, I can remember this over 2 decades later, right? But you know how bad it sucked, right?
Yeah. I think you remember the workouts that sucked the most, man.
Yeah, and then there was a bead, which was I think one-arm dumbbell rows and maybe dips, maybe or incline. I think it was dips. And then the next day was back squats at that tempo paired with leg curls for 10 by 10s, and then supplementary. And then there was an arms and shoulders day too, where it's biceps and triceps 10 by 10. And oh man, and I'm like, a super. If it says like a certain tempo and rest, like I'm super anal about that stuff. And like, oh, you're right, failing reps, and the chin up I couldn't do 10 sets of 10. I got through most of them. I think just BMX pulling on the bar strength because I was super new to strength training. I can't remember. I think I forced the ones I couldn't do.
Yeah.
But I remembered that my lats, like I couldn't even like put my shirt on to touch them. Right?
Oh my God, man! Like I couldn't bring my hand over my head for like a week. That was the most sore I've ever been in my lats.
Not to mention the leg soreness from the squat.
Now I know why my posture is so fucked up because of doing German volume training when I was 18.
Yeah. Anyway, good times. I may revisit that. I may have to do one of those in tribute.
In memoriam for old Charles Poliquin. The other one that definitely changed the game for us was the 6-12-25s.
Yes.
Those are awesome. I love that. And decreasing tempo and decreasing neuromuscular demand. So like 6 back squats, 12 lunges, and then 25 like step ups or walking lunges or jump switch lunges are a very good one. And
I've given wall balls for the 25.
Yeah. I've done that tons of times, and it's such a great muscular endurance hypertrophy work that it's very, very, very. I remember my buddy Dave Hochberg giving that to his fighters for a while, 6-12-25s, and they loved it, and they really had a great stimulus from it, just because it's such a good muscular endurance / strength thing that lends very nicely into the sport of MMA. So there was that, and then just the German body comp principles in general, A1, A2, B1, B2, and then like C1, C2, C3. That's just how I still write stuff today. I mean, look at the Fitbot app. Yeah. That's literally the template that it's based off of. So it's pretty special that all the work that he did. Again, like this is probably not only his work. There's probably a bunch of compiled brains, but again, for him to bring it all together and deliver it to a huge audience, that's pretty significant.
Yeah, and I think, and he was very upfront that I didn't invent this stuff. I got this, when I learned to read German so I could translate the text, and he will always credit where he found it. He's certainly good about that. Another thing that we use in our world a lot is clusters. Cluster sets is another thing that he brought to the forefront. So that's another very popular one in kind of the CrossFit world these days.
Yep.
And boy, I mean, there's certainly
the
more
eccentric
than that.
only work, or the eccentric with dropping weight and the concentrics.
Yeah, eccentric hooks. He was one of the very first people. I back in my garage days, I built some wooden eccentric hooks so I could do that.
That's right. I remember you talking about that.
Yeah, I made some here again recently, but now I see Rogue makes a nice pair, which we may get. But
they're not too.
It's not too spendy. Yeah. And then then there's the whole biosig thing as well. I remember hearing about that back before I ever thought I would coach people or have a gym, and I almost went to one of them that he had at his original facility down in Arizona, just for my own information. But I eventually got to one. Rob Wolf and I went to one in Phoenix in, I think it was 2009. possibly 2008. And that was super eye-opening, just kind of the concepts from functional medicine. And it's just incredible to watch him sit there and rattle facts off the top of his head.
Yes, that's the biggest thing.
It is, yeah, I had like 55 page of rapidly scrawled notes. Now, unfortunately, he jumps all over the place. So to collate it back into something, you know, I would have to have typed it all out and then organized it more. But there's just so many nuggets in there. It's unreal.
Yeah, yeah, that's one of the things that Charles Poliquin definitely brought to the table is his ability to, off the top of his head, just throw out some studies and cite papers and also from his athletes as well, like very Louis Simmons-esque almost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's definitely a great capacity for memory and knowledge, and I mean the amount of books he read, I don't even know. It's pretty ridiculous.
Oh yeah, I mean this was his life.
Yeah.
Another one that we did together was the deadlift progressions for like snatch grip deadlifts from the podiums.
Oh yeah,
we did that as well.
That's another one. Yeah.
But yeah, man. I mean, it's just so much stuff, and I mean, he had a good body of work. I mean, probably about a 30-year career at least in the strength and conditioning field, and left a great legacy, and even was continuing to work. I mean, he was probably still doing seminars and that kind of stuff. I think his passing was kind of sudden. So
yeah, unexpected. Well, I think he just opened a gym or a facility. Was in Colorado, I believe, Colorado Springs or something like that. Because I think I remember seeing, these new special dumbbells they had made for his gym.
Oh, no kidding.
So I don't even know if it opened yet or if it just opened.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, he was still in the trenches for sure. I mean, I'm sure he didn't have to work a lot, but he was still working with certain clients and still doing some seminars and different things.
Yeah.
After he kind of left his original company, the Poliquin Group, and then he kind of reinvented it, on his own.
Sensei.
Yeah. But big loss.
Yeah, big loss, big hole in the strength and conditioning community. And I imagine that there are a large amount of people who were working with him or under him that are now have a huge hole as well. So that's kind of something that you don't really think about. But like if your livelihood is based upon a person and their business, and that person passes away or retires, whatever it is, like that's you as well. You know what I mean? There's probably a bunch of people that relied on him for their careers. And I mean, we've talked about Justin Thibodeau before. I know he was directly under Poliquin, and probably was still directly working with him in some capacity. And there's a bunch of coaches just looking at his website that are kind of still with him. So
right, yeah. I wonder if they'll keep the company kind of going on.
Yeah, it's a great point. But it'd be
what's going to happen. Well, I imagine he probably has at least a few. In fact, I think I saw very recently he was working with some Olympic athlete. So somebody suddenly doesn't have their strength coach anymore.
Yeah, unbelievable, huh?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's again, huge loss, and I guess more and more will come out over the next few weeks about everything, and I think hopefully we'll get a nice compilation of his work eventually. That would be a fantastic thing. All the best stuff that he's done, whether it's from T Nation or his own site, I would love to see a nice compilation of his body of work and just see some of the golden nuggets that you could pull out of there. You could probably do a lifetime of just looking through the stuff that he's done.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's cool to go back and reread because some of that stuff I came across pretty early, and now with all the years of experience and knowledge, some of it makes a whole lot more sense to me than it did. In those early, I was like, oh yeah, I get it.
And then as we always say, like what's old is new again, or it always comes in cycles and that kind of stuff. So
yeah, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I kind of felt that way too. Even within it, like I said, it was one of my very early influences when I first got into everything. And then I don't say I got fully away from it. I still always wrote workouts in that way and whatnot. But then at some point after a few years having the CrossFit gym, and I started, looking back into his methods and utilizing those to help people, get stronger, and outside of the typical just pure mixed modal, and varied workouts. So it's kind of like it became new again at that point. But
yeah, it's funny how after learning a bunch of things, whether it's biomechanically or different techniques, and then integrating those philosophies, how supercharged they become. So one of the biggest problems that I always had with, say, like 10 sets of 3 with Poliquin, or even 10 by 5s, was that I was just not efficient enough to get a stimulus from those, workouts. And then you start to be moving more efficiently, and then you can actually create speed in the movements. And then you go back to that stuff. You're like, oh, this is what that was supposed to feel like.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Pretty amazing stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But other than that, in the world of nutrition and fitness and all that kind of stuff, this is something that we'll introduce this week, but we'll kind of dive into more next week. But, we had one of our often quoted, functional medicine practitioners, Chris Kresser, did a debate-ish kind of podcast on Joe Rogan's podcast against Dr. Joel Kahn, who is I believe he is a cardiologist who is an advocate for a vegan diet. And Chris Kresser is definitely more on the side of consuming animal products, not as a primary, but not as something where they're the devil, as a vegan would say. So obviously, if you were to ask Chris Kresser, if you asked him what to eat in a very broad way, he'd be like, probably mostly plant stuff, nuts and seeds, some good animal products, some good quality animal products, and that would be it. Where obviously Joel Kahn has advocated for a vegan diet, a lot of it based upon his practice of being a cardiologist and seeing these arteries blowing out and all these horror stories that he tends to quote and that kind of stuff. But Scott, I don't know if we ever talked about this before, but have you ever dived into or delved into veganism or doing any kind of vegetarianism before?
Not really, but yes. Funny, quick story. So before I, again, started working out, knew anything about anything, as I'm just basically a dumb BMX rider at this point. A lot of guys in that community were shifting toward vegetarian and veganism, as I think still to this day they are. But I always had a little bit. I was always a little bit of a skinny fat guy, so I thought, what the heck? I'll try this for 2 weeks, and I didn't do it well. In fact, I didn't do it well at all because I knew I wasn't eating any meat or anything like that. But that forced me to basically eat a ton of junk to make up my calories, because I wasn't really cooking that much for myself at this point, and I lived in a sort of a smaller town. There wasn't really
like ramen noodles?
wasn't. I'm eating ramen, because I'm on the road quite a bit too. I'm going to the convenience stores. Like, well, I can't have this. I guess I don't know. I'm starving. I'm eating a fruit candy bar.
Yep.
I ate way worse. I ended up with like quite a few donuts, things I wouldn't even then wasn't eating much. I put on weight. I got fat. I felt like crap. Now, granted, I'm not indicting, a vegetarian diet over my very piss poor attempt at it.
Yeah.
With no knowledge, but that was my one foray into it. I just basically ate junk food for 2 weeks and no meat.
I think that's a good point, though. I think the devil's in the detail sometimes, but I think there's a saying, like there was like a monk one day who pointed at the moon, and his like apprentice looked at his hand pointing at the moon. He goes, "Listen, it's the moon that you're looking at, not my hand." So it's like the mechanism for you to eat well isn't the most important part. It's about eating well. It's about getting to that point where you're not eating processed garbage, where you're eating quality foods, where you have some kind of portion control, when you're thinking about blood sugar management and hormonal management through foods. And if you were to ask me this question 5 years ago, I would say you're crazy about being a vegan. But if you were to be really diligent about mixing your qualities of proteins and actually getting complete protein sources, if you were diligent about getting enough calories in, and not just doing it in poor quality ways like doing junk food, I
Right.
would probably say it's a much better option than a typical Western diet, which is primarily just consuming massive amounts of refined carbohydrates. Now, I think that obviously there's levels to this game. That would be a much better alternative. I don't think anybody would say that eating a junk food diet or a modern Western diet is better than eating a vegan diet. That being said, I think that there's some shortcomings when it comes to eating a vegan diet. And I think one of the biggest things is that just the overall calories that you need to be able to take in, as, let's say, an athlete or a moderate to heavily active person, it's just very challenging to get in that kind of caloric intake, without just over consuming polyunsaturated fats and without eating all the time.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's where all the restrictive approaches kind of fall short, especially for those that are active, whether that's athletes, people that train a lot, or just have very physically active jobs. It's just so hard when you take away. Same thing in paleo, right? Unless you're eating scoopfuls of just refined oil, coconut oil or something, which
Yep.
that can't possibly be a great long-term solution. I mean, how are you possibly eating enough? And then same with in a vegan diet, it's very difficult to eat the bulk of foods you would have to eat to
Yeah.
get your necessary calories.
Yeah.
And
And then just the number of the amount of time it takes to digest from meal to meal. Like I have people have a hard time eating enough as is, and for them to have a salad the size of a punch bowl and be like, all right, you got to do that 2 or 3 times a day. It's just not viable for
it's
them.
not happening. Yeah, right.
Whereas if you add some animal products into your diet, it's just such a more calorically dense way of getting your food in.
Yeah, I think anytime you're starting to compare, they always compare whatever to the standard Western diet. Yeah, then I totally sure that a well-done vegan or vegetarian diet is better than any common Western diet, And I am of the opinion that being fairly close to vegetarian with some animal products probably is the best way, and it's roughly what I've kind of gravitated to doing. I definitely don't eat large amounts of protein or meat anymore. But with that said, I think it's absolutely essential to have some of it in there if you really want optimal health and longevity, especially if you have good sourced stuff.
Yeah, I think that is also where vegans seem to cherry pick things a little bit. Is that they're like, well, you go to McDonald's, that stuff's going to kill you. It's like, well, what if you having grass-fed beef where the cow was humanely treated, and the farmer and you saw the cow alive, and then 2 weeks later it's in your freezer. Or if you go and hunt something and it's being sustainably sourced. And then again, I'm going to kind of start to bridge this a little bit. But what about the argument of fish and seafood? Because that's the biggest thing that people say, there's saturated fat and that kind of stuff, and it's terrible, stop eating animal products. One of the biggest correlates to overall better cardiovascular health in terms of what's a component of your diet is fish. Eating more fish is like a direct correlate to having lower cardiovascular disease. So when they say eating animal products is bad for you, and then you say, well, what about fish? And the overwhelming amount of data says that fish is actually very, very good for the cardiovascular health and morbidity of a person. Things start to get very, very hard to defend. And I think that's one of the things that Chris has talked about plenty of times in terms of what an ideal diet might look like is having a vegetarian diet plus, like doing some sustainably sourced animal products, and then adding things like oysters and mollusks and all that kind of stuff. And I think next week we'll dive into a few of the little thises and that's, but also just to kind of bring this full circle. Also, one of the biggest names in the CrossFit / functional fitness / paleo community, Rob Wolf was on the edge of his seat listening to this podcast as well and posting on his Instagram a bunch of rebuttals. So if you do listen to the podcast with Joe Rogan, Joel, and Chris, Rob was putting up scientific papers within his Instagram refuting what Joel was talking about. So he was kind of in the background there, helping out Chris as best as he could.
Yeah, I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, something to look into this week.
Yeah. Yep.
Perfect. I think that's good for today, though. Scott, you got anything else?
Nope. Go do some 10x10s, and we'll talk next week.
We'll see if you're still sore. All right, I'm Sean LaFlock. You can get me at Sean at CrossFitDelraryBeach.com.
I'm Scott. You can get me at Scott at CrossFitPortland.com.
We'll get it there. All right, Scotty. I'll talk to you next week, brother.
Take care.
Later, dude.